Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 71. Now, last night we had what is on paper, to me, we debated this last week. I thought it wasn't, as cards go, that exciting. You beg to differ.
No, you were fair. You were fair.
Yeah, and I have to say, that main event, made up for any sort of wrongdoings or poor judging, which we'll definitely get into. Because what a fight it was on both ends of the spectrum. And obviously there was a lot of questions around the altitude with Salt Lake City. I am not really an advocate for events taking place there because for me, it opens up too many cans of worms, asks a lot of questions, and all it does is make you think, what could have been if it was in a normal place and at a lower altitude. But either way, we got a great fight out of it. Khalil Roundtree proving a lot of people wrong, and he may not have come out with the win. But I have to say, those first two rounds, I think myself and I think a lot of other people really started to believe that maybe he could do it. And I think it was you. I could be wrong here, but you mentioned something being in the air or there being something that, maybe it was just a changing of the guard moment. And that didn't end up coming to be, but I don't think we were far from it. I thought Roundtree looked excellent. And Pereira too, to his credit. And I'm sure we can dissect that in a second. But what were your initial thoughts just coming off of that main event?
It's just what we expect now, isn't it? Really, that type of performance. It honestly is. And that's the highest compliment you can have. Massive event in regards to Pereira's at the top of it. Saves another event because you think it had a hit or two. Aljamain Sterling Evloev would have been a good fight to add into that,
Forgot about that one.
which obviously we missed out on. So he saves the day again. And this is what's so impressive about him. And I mentioned this before, is the activity against that high-level opposition. The fact that coming into this fight, he had an injured rib, which is one of the worst injuries you can get in MMA because it's so debilitating. You can't quite honestly do anything. He was on antibiotics. Well, there you go. We'll get into that in a second. He was on antibiotics. He had messed up ligaments in his toes. All of these different things going on. And he goes out and does what he always does. And I don't think anyone finished that fight surprised massively. I think it was a beautiful finishing sequence in the fourth. And just as he's peppering him 100 times to the face, I'm thinking, you know what, Alex, you're going to have to start going to the body because he's just wearing all of these. And for some reason, he's not going down. And then literally, as I say that, he goes, boom, boom, two big shots to the body. And that was all she wrote. And there's only so many people that can take those sort of shots.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something to be said about that finishing sequence. As it was happening in that moment, there was a lot of thoughts going through my head. And something I really picked up on was DC kept repeating the one sort of Achilles heel, if you really want to call it that, of Pereira as he gets overzealous in those moments where he smells blood in the water like a shark. And he opens up his defenses quite a lot when he's looking for that finish. We didn't exactly see that against Roundtree. Yes, he kept his hands down and he was swinging hard for the fences, but he was way more measured, way more composed. And I'm not sure if perhaps the altitude was a factor in that or it was just more so improvements towards his game, which I think is more likely the case. But he took his time. He was patient, stalked Roundtree around the edge of the cage. Even when he knew Roundtree was on the ropes, he took his time, waited, and just really dissected him. And of course, you said those last two shots of the body were sort of the coup de grace on top of a really good performance where he had to dig deep, which we haven't seen him do a lot recently. And, as I said, that's probably a lot more credit to Roundtree from that southpaw stance, who had a lot of success in the first two rounds, dropping him, making a good read on that head kick and dropping him with that right hand. And again, I think that's also a testament to Alex with how good his chin is. True. There's always been a lot of questions with that. Obviously, we know at middleweight that weight cut affected him a lot. And at light heavyweight, he's generally been too good to be tested almost, if that makes any sense. And I feel like this was the first time we've really seen him take some big shots, flush, and he took them well. And not only that, came back strong. And you could smell at the end of that third round, you could see he was just smelling the blood a little bit. And you saw the tide beginning to shift. And that's when I was like, okay, this fight's only going one way. And we got a bloody finish at the end of it.
Yeah, I think when you have someone like Alex stalking you and you're having to move backwards and strike, it's going to be very energy sapping anyway. And then you factor in the fact a lot of stakes, a lot of attention on this fight at altitude with a lot of muscle mass in one of your only 5-round fights. It's going to have an effect on the gas tank. It just is. And then when you've got Alex just taking micro movements, just hunting you down, and you have to worry about the hook, you have to worry about the leg kick, because that's something we need to speak on as well. He absolutely toasted that front leg, same as he always does. And I really think that's what began to slow Khalil down. There were a few things which began a little bit more laboured, but once that front leg went, you could tell that Alex was happy. Like you said, it's true. He does get overzealous sometimes, but I think what he realised is when it started to get a little bit later, he realised he didn't have much, if any, weight on that front leg, and he wasn't going to be able to generate that much power. So I think Alex was just comfortable to sit in the pocket, see his shots, and happy to eat them and trade his own. And when he'd done that, it was just the beginning of the end, because it doesn't matter who you are. When that man's in front of you and your front leg's beaten up and you're having to play off of his timing, of his strikes, and he's jabbing your head, that jab was absolute money. Probably the most times we've seen him land that jab effectively. It was so clean, and we saw the damage it done to Khalil at the end of it, but it was just another display, wasn't it? It was just another display of how high level this man's kickboxing is. And if you are not an elite striker, and if you cannot at least show a mixed martial arts game to slow down the striking to a certain extent, if any, you're just not going to be able to beat this man. And I still do believe that Jan Blachowicz is his toughest matchup. And I know that's not spoken about enough, but I don't think it's Ankalaev. I don't think it is. I think it's Jan Blachowicz.
I do as well.
Really?
The more I think about that matchup, I agree with you. The more I think about that matchup, even going into this fight, I was originally, if we cast the minds back probably a few months, I was much more on the train of Ankalaev being able to dictate with his wrestling. But we see a lot with him falling in love with his hands. In a lot more of his recent fights, we see less of his wrestling and more of him using his hands. And he claimed he was going to do that against Alex Pereira should they fight.
What wrestling?
Yeah, it's true. He doesn't really use it at all anymore.
I'm not saying he can't wrestle. I'm just saying, what have we seen recently in his career at a high level which would indicate that he's going to take down, control, and damage Alex on the ground? We haven't seen a lot to suggest that. On both sides, we've seen Alex mitigate danger, get back to his feet, and we've seen Alex not be too grapple heavy and not be able to do too much with it against very elite opposition. So, sorry to cut in.
I don't think there's anyone right now, and not a single man right now at 205. I don't think can beat him.
No man alive. Bisping loves that one.
I was about to go and try to do a Bisping impression there, but I think I'll save myself the embarrassment. It's one thing I definitely cannot do. I mean, I'll raise you this question. This is a bit of a rogue one.
Go for it.
This is very rogue. Maybe something actually we probably won't ever see this, just on a case of timescales. But imagine if we had Bo Nickel moving up to light heavyweight against Alex Pereira. If I had to just throw that at you, does that not excite you? Because that excites me.
Rogue, first and foremost.
Very, but yes, I'm not wrong.
And certainly a very different time scale to this current conversation. I appreciate that, and I know you know that. But I get what you're playing at with that, because we speak about needing to be the highest level of striker. Well, if you're not that, because realistically no one in middleweight or light heavyweight, arguably even heavyweight, as much as I love Tom, is he as credentialed a kickboxer in the MMA and the kickboxing world in regards to what he's shown us on a consistent basis? Probably not yet. Not as much yet, probably not. So in those 3 weight classes, you're not going to get anyone that's going to be able to purely outstrike him for 5 rounds. I just don't believe it. That means you have to get someone that's going to be able to trump him significantly in the grappling. And what elite grapplers are there within those 2 weight classes, let's say? Not a lot, are there? There's not a lot. And Bo Nickel is probably that first guy.
Would be my...
Well, that's why I say 2 weight classes, right? Because when you start talking about Tom, now I think the conversation has changed.
My bad.
When it comes to grappling, I think now the conversation has changed, because you're talking about someone who does have legit wrestling, does have legit submissions, and he can do that at 250, 60 pounds, and we've never seen Alex do that. So I reserve that conversation, but if we're talking middleweight, light heavyweight, who has lights out grappling? Not really anyone, to be honest. Lights out? Not really anyone.
I mean, it's still, regardless, as a matchup that excites me. But if I had to put you on the spot, I'm assuming there's really only one name here, but who are you putting Alex against next? And obviously, he probably deserves a long-awaited break after really carrying this company on his back for the last 2 years. You know, I don't think that's really an exaggeration. You know, you pick a card, he main evented half of them. So a long-deserved break. I saw rumors about him maybe being out to July. I know he's been dealing with some injuries. I don't know, Polino, is it Polino or Polino? How do you pronounce his name? He spoke about Alex really only having a 3-week camp, and that was here in Utah to acclimatize to the altitude and heal from his injuries. So
stupid.
I mean, I guess that just shows you a testament to how well he did to dig deep into that 4th round, because you could tell maybe he wasn't as good. It wasn't as polished as a performance as his other ones because he didn't find the finish early. But again, that's such a high bar he's set. So there's not really any complaints I can really have. But again, going back to what I said, only one name on the list. For me, it's Ankalaev, and I'm assuming you're going to say the same here. That is provided he beats Rakic, of course.
It made me laugh what you just said there, because I saw a few people say that online. Didn't quite look himself, wasn't quite as sharp, wasn't quite as polished. Exactly. That's why it was so impressive. That's why it was so impressive. For those that don't watch football, Leo, as you'll know, the sign of a championship caliber team is when the team plays bad and wins.
Yes,
as soon as you have a team that does that consistently, that's when they start winning titles. That's when they start winning cups, because you find this default setting which wins. And Alex Pereira has found that. He's found this default setting that when he is injured, when he is on antibiotics, when he does have injuries, when he does have no camp, when he is fighting at altitude, when he has been back to back to back to back in the last 5 months,
mental,
he still wins. And this is what's so impressive about him. So the next fight that will come up will be dicing up the X's and O's of how people can beat him, and we'll say Khalil done this and Izzy done this and Jamal did this. When you factor everything that's happening, the man keeps winning. And this is what's so impressive about people that defend the belt. It doesn't matter to them if they have a bad night at the office, if they're injured, camp, antibiotics, no camp, opponent, they find a way to win. And I don't care about styles anymore. I don't care about skill sets. That man right now has found a way to win better than anyone else on the roster. And I think even if you're looking at the pound for pound rankings, you'd have every right in saying he's the number 1 pound for pound.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Right. Where'd you stand on that?
100%. Yeah, I'm full agreement. Again, people are going to call recency bias and the caliber of opponents compared to Makhachev and the manner of wins and, you know, a variety of other factors. But if we're talking about, you know, fundamentally what this sport's about, it's about winning and how effectively you're doing it. And I don't think there's anyone doing it better right now than Alex Pereira is. It just demolishes everybody. That is, I believe it's 4 straight knockouts in a row over multiple former champions. It's probably more. I don't even know anymore.
Crazy.
Name a man and he's finished him. This is my point. And this is no disrespect to Dustin Poirier, but if you look at Islam Makhachev's last fight, he got taken to those deep waters.
Puff Daddy?
You know, really. Say again?
You said name a man, he's finished him.
Oh.
Puff Daddy.
Yeah. But,
too soon?
A little bit. No,
Colin Heron?
No.
Too soon.
Fuck's sake. Yeah, too soon.
Way too soon.
Fuck's sake. I thought we weren't going there.
Too
no, it's good. Yeah, I did. But yeah, going back to that, no disrespect to Dustin Poirier, but he was able to drag Islam Makhachev to those deep waters. No one's doing that to Poirier at this level. You know, obviously Khalil definitely gave him some resistance, and this is coming from someone who's wanted Khalil to win, got excited when he landed that big right hand and stunned Alex. But it's nothing compared to that. You know, Pereira will win, and it doesn't matter where the fight goes. You just see the tide shifting. If he's facing adversity, it's just an inevitability how that fight goes. Look at the Adesanya fight down at middleweight, the first one. He was losing until he wasn't. And it's just, that's the mark of a champion, as you said. He's the men and women who find a way to win, even when the odds are against them, the cards are stacked against them. And Alex is, you know, he embodies that sort of mantra. So I can't wait to see where he goes next. But I think we should look down at the card particularly at the co-main event, because there was a lot of controversy around this one. I spoke at the start, as we just opened the episode, about poor judging. I think this was probably, in my opinion, one of the worst ones on the night, because for me, I don't know how you're scoring that for Pena. I really don't. And I think, just to rub salt in the wound, we spoke last week about her playing. Oh, okay. We'll get there in a second.
Sorry.
This is rare. No, I felt you had to mention it, because we don't disagree. We don't disagree very often. But I think, to rub salt in the wound, this is kind of a smart thing from Juliana, because we spoke last week about how she's very good at playing the villain role and pissing people off. And in her interview after winning the belt back, for those who didn't see, she, tapped into that, completely. And the UFC, credit to their team. They're very good at what they do. They put us side by side with Kayla Harrison, who was watching backstage. And there was no mention of her, despite the press conference build-up we had in Fight Week. Instead, she was trying to goad Amanda Nunes out of retirement for a trilogy match, which, of course, ruffled the feathers of just about every MMA fan on Twitter. I'll say Twitter specifically, because it's a cesspit and people get angry at a gust of wind on there. But as I said, I don't think she won the fight. I thought Pennington did enough. It was close. I won't doubt that. But for me, I thought Pennington definitely should have got the nod. I was surprised, but you seem to think otherwise.
There's a lot of fights on a pay-per-view late in the morning, especially when I'm watching it with friends, which I was yesterday, where I sit on here and I say, you know what, I'd have to rewatch it to give a more conclusive opinion, because I wasn't dialed in. I was actually dialed in for that fight. At this point, mostly everyone had fallen asleep, and I was dialed in. And I watched the first 3 rounds, and I would have to go and do it myself to be double as confident with what I'm saying here, but if memory serves me correctly, I remember thinking, if you watch this, no commentary, no sound, and you just watch what's happening, Juliana Pena's landing the cleaner shots. She was parrying almost all of the punches of Pennington, and she was landing a clean jab and a clean right hand quite repetitively and pretty often throughout the first, second, and third. And it looks ugly, and it's not pretty, but it was effective. And I think if you watch that fight again and really, really just see who's landing strikes, because it got to a point, I kept hearing commentary, and I'm never usually someone to flag that, am I? I'm never someone that goes, oh, the commentator said this. And I get sometimes sitting ringside, you see one thing and you create a narrative for yourself, and then you want to look into that narrative. I do the same thing. I just so happened to do it in reverse this time, and was looking with an eagle eye into Juliana Pena's game. Jab, 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 parry, 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 out of range, jab, parry, out of range, jab. And I'm looking at the position of the octagon, and Pena's getting backed up a little bit. And I'm thinking, right, okay, she's won the first 3. She's 3-0 up. And then to me, she definitely lost the last 2. So when I heard Pena, I was like, checks out. And then I saw the scorecards online that everyone had, and all of the media members, every single one of them, had Pennington. And I genuinely believe that at least 30% of those, 40% of those change their mind if they go back and watch the fight with no sound and they look at significant strikes in the first, second, and third. I genuinely believe that.
Coming out the gates there. It's rare. I feel like it's rare that,
I honestly just do, because you know what it is? I never usually make a point of being so eagle-eyed, and I was calling it out. I was calling to my friend, right? Every time that Eva Lady landed a significant shot, pretty much.
Just talking to no one.
Yeah, pretty much. But I began calling it out. So if Pennington landed a clean shot, I would say right hand, for example. But my sequences of conversation were jab, 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 right hand, left, right. She was landing little hooks as she was sort of circling out laterally. Doesn't look nice, doesn't look pretty, and isn't the most aesthetic style by any means whatsoever. Did she win that fight? In my opinion, 100%. And the fact that there was such a discrepancy online, I was thinking, you know what was the first red flag? I actually saw the scorecards on X in the bottom left, and it said 1-0 Pennington. I was thinking, didn't have that. Then it said 2-0 Pennington. I was like, no, these people are not watching well enough. Okay, a couple of these are close, but they're not watching well enough. And there wasn't any grand moments where oh, she's been rocked or she's been knocked down in the first 3. But in regards to clean, significant strikes, 100% I had Pena. So yeah, I don't agree with the backlash, to be honest.
Okay. I think that's a fair argument. Again, I will reiterate, it was a close fight. I just think I saw it the other way. And, I felt like the majority of people did as well. And also, as I said, Pena does get under my skin. He gets under people's nerves. What? Say again?
The first is the swing round, I'm guessing that people were saying.
Yeah,
the fourth
I
and
think
the fifth
so.
I had clearly, right?
Yeah, Pennington definitely won the 4th and 5th.
So,
and then, which was the round where she had the body triangle, where Juliana had the back take and was dictating that round. There was the second or third, I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, the first round was very close. I was struggling to
Can I say one more thing off the back of it?
Shoot.
I'm also going to be hated for this as well.
Oh boy.
I like the call out. Now, let me explain.
Okay.
I'm a big Kayla Harrison fan. Listen, I don't have any horse in this race. I don't really care what happens, to be perfectly honest. I'm just explaining why I actually believe that this was a fair call out and why I actually believe that she's just going to get a lot of stick. She always gets a lot of stick anyway. That's her character. So it's not, I'm trying to
very true.
deflect that for her. I'm just explaining why I think some of it's unjust. Before Kayla Harrison even came into this flipping organisation, and I'm a big Kayla Harrison fan, they've obviously had fights, they've had animosity between Amanda and Juliana, and after that second fight, ever since the first second that she lost, she was calling for the trilogy. The second that she lost, she was calling for that trilogy. She had an injury, she was calling for the trilogy. She was doing interviews, she was saying, I know Amanda doesn't want to retire, I want that trilogy. And it was fair. Whether I think I wanted to see it or not is besides the point. It was fair. They're 1-on-1. They both finished each other. I get it. I completely understand it. Biggest name in women's history.
I will actually correct you. Pena didn't actually get finished in that second fight. As much as it looked it on the brink. But yeah.
Good point. May as well have done. To be honest, It was so brutal, right? It's my point. It was crazy.
Okay, so I'm actually going to further counter that, because there was a couple of moments in that fight where people kind of forget Pena nearly had an armbar. It was actually very close. I can't remember, late in the later rounds. People forget that. Sorry, that just came to my mind.
She did get battered, so it's easy to forget that, right? And we're talking about rounds that were maybe even 10-7s. My point is, she finished Amanda. Amanda goes out there and absolutely smokes her. I get why you'd want a trilogy. Makes all the sense in the world. Biggest name in women's combat history. Cool. Now, Kayla Harrison being on that same card, again, big Kayla Harrison fan. If Kayla goes out, which I thought she was going to, by the way, goes out and obliterates Vieira in one round, finishes her, and then says, I want the winner of the title, sweet. That didn't happen. In fact, that really didn't happen. It was a win. It was another good win. Cool. Progresses her to the title. Cool. Kicks on her career. Cool. It was not a statement piece, by all means. Now, if Juliana Pena got on the mic and Kayla had just beasted her opponent in one round, submitted her, knocked her out, and looked terrifying, and she went, I want Amanda, then I'd be a bit, oh, come on, like, we've got this girl here, she's active, she's smashing everyone. No, that's the fight to make. But if I'm Juliana Pena, I would still be probably saying that as well. I would probably rather the Amanda fight, because I don't think Kayla done enough to get her excited. Now, do I think it's the fight? Yeah, probably. Do I think it's a good fight? Yeah, probably. But do I understand why she's standing there going, I want Amanda Nunes? Of course I do. Trilogy with the GOAT, or a performance which was, it was, you won.
Yeah. It was
do you see where I'm coming from?
No, I get you. That's a fair point,
I get why
actually.
she's going down that road, is my point. And it's not as if this is just created out of nothing. She's been banging this drum for like the last, 2 years?
But that's why she's getting on everyone's nerves. Do you know what I mean?
This isn't a new narrative. And
of course.
And the last thing I'll say, she also wasn't wrong. She said the first day that Amanda retired, she said she hasn't retired. She doesn't want to retire. I guarantee she wants to come back. And then what happens? Kayla Harrison, when she was at UFC 300 and had a big win, what does Amanda Nunes do? Straight online and says, I'm eyeing up a return. So she's right. She's also correct. Like, Amanda Nunes wasn't
How old is Nunes
fully
now?
committed to. I think around about 37, maybe, if I were to guess.
That's a big question. This is something I don't see a lot of conversation about. Is really we're in that. I feel like not necessarily the first, but I think this is a defined point where we're seeing the best of the women's generation, like sort of reach the end of an arc of a fighting sort of career, and that's always a big factor because obviously if you look at the men's divisions, how age affects the various weight classes is completely different. Obviously, we see the heavyweights are able to stay on much longer because the power is lasting to go, right? It's the speed and the reaction times. Hence why you see the lower weight classes like flyweight, bantamweight, the drop-off tends to be a little bit more sooner. But I feel like we've never had those questions really answered in the women's weight classes. I feel like this is the first time we're finally starting to see that with people like Valentina Shevchenko. Probably isn't as sharp as she used to be, but still, you know, far ahead of the rest of the pack, you know, judging by her ability and, of course, her recent title win. And that's something I want to see answered with Amanda Nunes, because I'm just checking now. She is 36, which by men's standards would be, you know, really reaching the tail end of her career. So we're waiting to see really how if she does come back, which I think, as you're saying, I think she probably will for the right fight. Whether that's with Pena or with Harrison, whoever. That's a question I really want to see answered because it's a big factor. It's not a young man or in this case women's sport by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm excited. I don't think the fight's competitive regardless who Pena fights. I think Harrison and Nunes probably work her pretty badly, but she's going to do well to sell the fight. I think she's very good at doing that and she'll make a good bit of money out of it. So I can't fault her for that.
For sure. I do have to say as well, Kayla Harrison deserves an honourable mention because the fact that she's competing at bantamweight, a weight class that she hasn't been since she was 16 years old, the fact that she's a two-time Olympic medalist, MMA world champion, and now she's coming in and making that sort of sacrifice on a continued basis just shows you the mentality and the mindset that woman has. And I was listening to an interview that she done with Kamaru Usman, and she was explaining that she does about 2 hours a day of steady state zone 2 cardio every single day in fight camp to get prepared for this. So off the back of her 2 sessions, she's doing 2 hours a day of steady state cardio just so she can get down to that weight class. So whatever happens with Kayla Harrison, I always have maximum respect for her because whenever she goes into a fight, I favour her because I know that anything she can do to get a competitive advantage and to be the most evolved version of herself, I know for a fact she's doing. So anything can happen in a fight, but probability would suggest you always have to go with her just off of what she's achieved and her mindset. So super impressive.
Yeah, it takes a certain caliber of person to be able to you know, go through that struggle of a weight cut like that. And something I actually just thought of now, I'm just going to sort of prop the rhetorical question is, you've got to keep in mind, come a championship fight, which seems to be, you know, the inevitable, you know, next step, she's going to have to make championship weight.
Not a problem.
So there's that extra bit to cut, you know, and I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're doing that much, you know, I don't know, it's going to be tough.
I don't think
could have a Charles Oliveira situation. You never know.
I don't think it would be a problem, to be fair, just because she looks comfortable on the scales. It's not as if she is in discomfort. She doesn't look drawn in, sucked in. She makes it like a professional. Like I said, she has that mindset where she's not getting into camp and thinking, right, now I need to lose some weight. No, she's got an eye on her career at all times. So if you said to her, oh, you've got a title fight, I think the least of her concerns would be making that extra pound. But it's a fair point. I get why you've brought it up. It's very, very relevant. I just don't know if it would be a big point of discussion.
Okay. Any other fights that's sticking out to you? Obviously, we talked about bad judging. There's one over there that really sticks out, which I don't really think was that controversial. But again, I seem to be in the same position you were with the Pena-Pennington fight, which was Mario Batista getting the nod over Jose Aldo. I saw a lot of people, particularly in my Discord, getting very angry at that. I personally was indifferent. I thought Batista did enough, and it was more so a case of Aldo not answering any of the questions Batista was proposing. So I didn't have a problem with that. And that wasn't the most exciting fight. You know, it never is when you're just watching guys grueling against the fence. But Batista did more. That was my logic for that. And I was not mad about the decision.
It just goes to show how unbelievable Jose Aldo is. The
Very
fact
true.
that he's 38 years of age.
And that's that just to jump in there. That's even up for debate, judging by what Gilbert Burns has been saying. Have you seen that? You haven't seen this?
What, he's 44?
So no, or genuinely. So basically, but Gilbert Burns in Fight Week, he said on a podcast that I'm getting might get the numbers wrong here, but he said that when Burns started out training, Aldo was 5 years older than him, and now he's only 1 or 2. so there's a very good chance that Aldo is actually older than is said on paper, which if anything shows how even more impressive it actually is that he's still hanging at this level. So credit to him.
There is not enough time in the day to explain how impressive this man is. And every time he steps into the cage, it just cements in my mind that man is the top 3 greatest of all time, in my opinion.
Wow.
In my humble opinion.
Statement.
Top 3 greatest of all time.
Really?
And if you want me to explain why, I don't know. I just know he's in the top 3. Because, in my opinion, it's what you value, right? So everyone has their own opinion of what they value and what comes into the greatest of all time. For me, the obvious factors that he's never popped for PEDs throughout his entire career is a massive thing. The fact that he was undefeated for 10 years and was a defending champion however many times is another thing. The fact that he evolved the sport is another thing. The fact that he then went to bantamweight and only lost to champions is another thing. The fact that he has the greatest takedown defense of all time, changed my mind, is another thing. The fact that he took a break from the UFC, went into boxing, fought the hardest hitting featherweight of all time in boxing, comes back straight into the UFC at the highest level and just goes to compete again is so impressive. I can't even begin to describe it. But the fact that he's still so good and so sharp that people have to get him to a position where they don't strike with him and they can't get him to the ground and he gets this stalemate against the cage, it just shows how respected and how feared and how quick is this man? He's seemingly 62, according to Gilbert Burns. And the speed of him...
I'm surprised you hadn't seen that.
I actually hadn't seen that, to be honest. But it doesn't surprise me at all. It doesn't surprise me at all. So I just can't explain enough how impressive Jose Aldo is. I know he didn't win, and I didn't need to be shown by Mario Batista that he was impressive. I knew it already. He showed decent grappling, I want to say. I can't say it was not effective because Merab didn't take down Jose Aldo. No one really takes down Jose Aldo. He's been taken down literally a handful of times in his career. And whenever he gets down, he gets straight back up. The man's an absolute phenom. I can't say enough good things about him, to be perfectly honest. I'm a massive fan.
Neither can I, in truth. He is, he's definitely up on that, at least very much in the debate for the Mount Rushmore of the UFC.
Question?
Shoot.
Is Jose Aldo versus Dominic Cruz the fight to make next?
Oh, yes, I'm all over that. I just wish we would have got it earlier, but I'm not going to complain. No, it makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. I mean, I'm always forgotten about Cruz. He hasn't fought in so long. When was his last fight? Who was that? Casey Kenny? Or did he have one after that?
Brother, that was about 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Casey Kenny's been put inside for
I know,
assault by that point.
I know,
at this point.
But that's what I mean. Was it not him?
No, he fought Cheeto after that.
Oh, he did in the he got knocked out by Cheeto. Yeah, that was the last one, right?
And just then he fought.
Oh, it's Pedro Munoz as well in between.
Pedro Munoz.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, August 2022. So it has been a hot minute, over 2 years.
2 years. Now. Jesus, yeah, that's a long time.
Time waits for no man, and especially in MMA, and he is 39. And realistically, at this point, Aldo's probably about that as well. So it lines up.
He's 46, apparently.
Yeah, he's 46. So yeah, I'm fully on board with that.
It's a great fight.
That's
It's
a
a great
great fight,
fight.
isn't it? Stylistically as well, because they're both so identifiable by their fighting styles. Cruz,
True.
probably to make a bigger point of that, because he really defined his own weird drunken master style, if that makes sense. That's what I like to call it. And Aldo is just very identifiable with the way he fights, even if it is a bit more conventional. So it just makes for an engaging one purely on styles alone, regardless of the factors of age and being at your prime, etc. Just forget all that. You got two legends of the sport going against each other. What's not to love? I'm all for it.
I also think as well, with someone like Dom Cruz, he may mix in his grappling. He typically always does. But Dom Cruz is not stalling positions. He just isn't. He's not that type of guy. He's not that type of guy. If he initiated grappling exchanges, in my opinion, if he initiated grappling exchanges and he was not able to progress them, can't see a world in where he's stalling out positions to secure rounds. I just can't see that. I just can't. I think he would progress his position at all times. So I also think it would either create the grappling exchange or would create the separation to go back to the striking. So I think from that stylistic angle, when you take someone like a Mario Batista, who's got everything to fight for in his career and needs to secure a win against one of the biggest names ever, which is another point, by the way, that we have to bring up. Not only is Aldo still fighting against young, hungry prospects, but he's giving them the opportunity to make a name off of him. He's going,
very true.
Jonathan Martinez, cool. No one knows who Jonathan Martinez is. I know who he is. We know who he is. We watch the sport. He's very good. No one knows who Jonathan Martinez is. Literally no one in the meta of this sport. You have to be pretty switched on. Even though he's in the rankings, he's a relatively quiet character, and you just probably wouldn't know. Mario Batista, very talented. Some good finishes. But again, he's not a big name. The casuals aren't going to know who Mario Batista is. They would have no idea if you showed him his face. And Jose Aldo's going, yeah, all right, I'll face the 28-year-old that wants to make a name off me. And you just have to respect that. It's just, it's ridiculous. It really is. But yeah, Dom Cruz is the fight to make next. Make no mistake about that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of other fights in there, but I think we can probably just glide through those. And obviously looking ahead, we got 308, which we aren't going to get stuck into right now. But going ahead, that is what we have said on many occasions, probably the most exciting fight card of the year outside of 300, and main event wise, one of the best fights you can make ever. So we're going to get stuck into that at some point. Just not today, but what I did want to talk about, of course, is we are a creator podcast first. So that is always something we want to jump into. You have had, I'm going to safely assume, a pretty hectic week, as it usually is. Anything particular that stuck out for you in the casuals space?
I don't think there's anything necessarily too crazy or too different this week. I think
actually, I'm going to twist that. Actually,
go for it.
Let's say outside of casuals, because I feel like that's an interesting thing we don't talk about, because you are one to say you're very much just everything is your work, right? So I feel like there's a more interesting question there. Is there anything outside of that for you that's been the case?
The truth of it is, I don't think everything is my work.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you get where I'm coming from, right?
No, you're right and you're wrong. You're right 100%, but you're also wrong. And that's why I just wanted to explain it. It's not everything is my work. It's everything is my work. And what I mean by that is it's not as if, I don't get to do anything because I'm just doing my work. Everything I want to do, I engineer in a way so that it is my work. For example, when I'm going to cook, or I'm doing a project or a show, work, or whether I'm designing my clothing or I'm training Muay Thai. I've done a little bit of a Muay Thai session this week. Got to wear the clothing that I've been designing for it, and then got to record a little bit of content and set up some one-to-ones as well for next week. So I'll be doing that. But I think it's what I wanted to do is every second pretty much be progressing a brand, progressing the business. But what I also engineered in a way was everything I enjoyed doing being my brand and business. So they work harmoniously, if that makes sense. So it wasn't necessarily anything too different, anything too crazy or hectic this week. I think it was probably one of those weeks where you just keep your head down and you chip away. I think I've done a good job to build off of the organization that I've been speaking about the last couple of weeks, just in regards to having a plan for the week, having my content backed up for the week, and creating consistently. I think there's obviously a few things that I could definitely improve on for the next week, but I would say it's more of the same. How about yourself?
Work-wise, yeah, I think so. For me, it's getting used to that new structure of, planning out when I'm going to do a video, which I spend multiple weeks on, and whether it's about what's worth the time investment. We speak a lot about, valuing our time and where we use it and being more efficient with that. We spoke last week about the 24-hour thing.
Yeah.
Sure, technically everyone has the same 24 hours in a day and everyone can be more efficient, but it's specific to you, right? Everyone's got a different way of being more efficient. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot this week in terms of building out, and finding experience in making longer videos, because it is a bit of a different challenge for me. The tutorial one was meant to be a lot longer than it was, that documentary that I did on YouTube. But I ended up spending a hell of a lot of time just fine tuning, little things to make it a much better video. And I was very proud with how that turned out. But there's a fine line with that. You got to balance with, I don't like to talk about finances in the sense of it being the be all and end all, but at the end of the day, it does matter because it's how you keep the lights on. It's how you keep operating. So that is, of course, a factor. So I have to take that into account as well. So that's my plan for this week. Is I think I'm not 100% on it, but we are going full ahead, or me rather, on the Charles Oliveira documentary, which I did write a long time ago.
Nice.
But I'm scrapping the whole thing, obviously, and we're going ahead with that probably for the next 2 weeks. So that's quite exciting. But it's also, again, so many new challenges that arise with that. But
have you
I'm excited.
done a Max Holloway one?
I did not that long ago, which is a bit annoying. Strangely, it didn't do that well. I did like 25k, which isn't terrible, but like there's a couple of videos I make, right, and you'll probably get this, where you really feel a step up in quality. Like there's really a defined feeling. You're like, wow, this is a lot better than my previous work, rather than just a gradual thing. And that video, that Max Holloway video I did, was definitely one of those. Looking back on it, it's not as good as my current stuff, which is only a good thing. But it just shows you how much I've improved in a short amount of time. And I was proud of that at the time. And I'm a bit disappointed it didn't get to as many, reach as many people as I hoped it would have done. But I'll definitely do another Holloway video in the future. And, if he wins against Topuria, it's a no-brainer, is it not? But yeah, work-wise, pretty standard. I had jiu-jitsu training yesterday, which was fun. Again, getting my ass handed to me a lot more. I think I spoke about when I first started getting back into it a couple of months ago. I was just, surprising myself on how well I was doing. And then, of course, I feel like you have to go through that period of getting humbled and ragdolled on a consistent basis. And I feel like that's been the case for the last week or two. But I did land a TP choke, which is a bit rare. Don't normally hit one of those.
That's in the gi though, right?
No.
Oh,
it's essentially you can. I mean, sure, you can hit it in the gi, but it's basically so with a triangle, you have one leg over around the neck, so past through the arms essentially. So you get what I'm saying. You have one one leg in, one leg out essentially, or with the arm, right? So instead of that, it's both of them, and then so you have both your legs wrapped around the neck, right, in front of the arms. So if you're playing guard, I'm trying to visualize this for the listeners as well. So if you have both legs, if you're playing on your back, you're in full guard, and they pass both of your legs. So it's like a last-ditch effort before you get fully passed, essentially. And you wrap both the legs round the neck, and you straighten out and S-grip your hands behind your legs, and then straighten out and squeeze. Like a little TP, hence why it's called a TP choke, because you're pointing your legs upwards. Yeah.
Kind of like that looking.
Sort of like that. Yeah. It's very narrow with the legs. Yeah. So that was interesting. Hit one of those, which is I don't do very often, mainly because I'm not really in that position too often. But for the most part, getting my ass handed to me, but wouldn't have it any other way. Important. Something you have to go through in any martial arts journey is just being humbled, or just learning that there are quite literally levels to this game, to quote Corey Anderson. But yeah, fun experience. And of course, in my personal life as well, there's always hurdles I think everyone goes through. Started doing therapy again, which is good. I talked about this on stream a little bit. But going back into that just for little things, just to target specific things. I think I'm at that point now where I know my mind very well. And I feel like you've said something similar, maybe without the professional help. You're very good at understanding your emotions and how your brain operates. I think that's a really important thing for people. And I'm at that point as well. So I know what I'm trying to target with these sessions and where I'm essentially not trying to fix, but things I want to just, not bad
strategies
habits,
that you can have to improve certain areas,
specific areas
that you struggle with. Yeah, for sure.
Essentially. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Start getting back into that, and that's goods and bads to that. I feel like there's a part of me that feels a bit disappointed in myself for that. Do you know what I mean? The negative side of me, of course. You know what I mean? Obviously, I'm being very harsh, but you almost feel like you should be able to handle it by yourself. Obviously, that's a dumb way of thinking.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, of course.
Just a dumb way of thinking.
Not the way I want to think.
There's not much else.
I'm glad to be doing that.
To give back to that. You are right.
Yeah,
it's just
but the thing is that the main reason I was doing it is because the problems I were having were outside of work, but they were getting so bad to a point where they were seeping into my work life, and I think that's a really bad thing, where it starts killing my productivity and killing my my drive and a lot of other aspects, not even just with work, but in general. So it's little things that seep out into other areas of my life, and that's when I was like, okay, we gotta nip this in the bud.
We've spoke about it before, and it is true.
Yes.
You have to, no matter who you are, whether you are a professional athlete in tennis, in MMA, or whether you're running a business, whether you're someone that's a creator that wants to get to the top of your field, if you want to be the 0.1%, you have to have healthy relationships throughout your life. You just have to, with your mind, with your actual relationships, with your associations with people, to your work, all these different elements. Yeah, you have to have that. For what we do, we've spoke about before, we have to act like professional athletes. You have to recover well. You have to eat well. You have to get good nutrition. You have to work out. Now, these are all things that are imperative to professional athletes, but these are things that are imperative to athletes of the mental side as well. If you want your brain to perform at its best function, you have to do all the things that you need to do if you want your body to perform of the same function. Because guess what a lot of people don't speak of is we're very comfortable with the idea of training a certain way or how to live a certain way if you want to become the best bodybuilder in the world. Well, your brain is also a muscle. So if your job is using your brain quite literally to create things and to monetize that, then you have to train that muscle in the same way. So yes, you have to sleep well, you have to recover well, you have to have good nutrition, you have to stay hydrated, all of those things. But you also have to have good relationships outside of that so that you can be fully focused and dialed into that and be fully present. Because if you're sitting at your desk and you're thinking of some argument that you've had with X, Y, and Z, and you're not thinking about the script that you're writing, you're taken away from the present moment and it compromises what you're doing. And I was watching the fights last night with my boy and I said to him, how crazy is it to just look at Khalil Roundtree there, the walkout he done, how calm, how relaxed he looked, and then he stayed in the middle of the octagon. I said to my friend, how hard would it be to be present in that moment, in that very moment right there? How difficult would it be to be present? And although that's an example at a very pinnacle and a very extreme one, we need to be like that with every part of our lives all the time as much as we can. So you're definitely right in doing that because they're all interchangeable is my point. If you're having arguments with family or friends or a girlfriend or whatever it is, of course that's going to affect your work. It's a no-brainer. So if you can take care of those, whether it's a little bit or a lot of it, is going to positively impact your work. So
there's
you
knock-on
have
effects on both ends.
Of course it is. You have to strive to just get better in all of that. Me and my mates were talking about it yesterday. He was showing me even his weight loss transformation, and it was crazy. And I said to him, everyone that goes to the gym for the most part has body dysmorphia. So if you see someone who you know very well and they trust you, and if you said something to them, they would trust what you said. Even if you told them the transformation is crazy, the body dysmorphia is still in a phase of their life where they wouldn't even understand it. They wouldn't even realize it. And I was saying this to my friend as well, and he knows because I've been there. I'm not in that position anymore, but I've been there and lived it. And I said to him, you know how it is. You know that I am correct. You know that I'm looking at that objectively And the fact that you've lost 37 kilos, your flipping delts are now prominent. I've seen your shoulders for the first time, and you drastically lost the weight. You know I'm correct. But also saying that, I'm not trying to make you feel a certain way or see it how I'm seeing it, because that's not going to happen for a long time. It's just it's something that's not spoke about enough. And I know this is specifically more physical and more the eye test, but people think you're going to have this transformation. Oh, instantly feel better. You're not. Body dysmorphia takes a long time to get to understand and to break out of. And time, I've seen personally, anecdotally, is usually the best healer. Time and perspective over time. And I said to him, you're not going to get that for a very long time. But just know, as an objective third party, it looks crazy from the outside. I know I went on a bit of a tangent.
No.
I felt like it was somewhat
you ain't got to
applicable.
ever apologize. So, this is our podcast. This is what we do.
True.
We do tangents. So there's no need to apologize. Tangents are a prerequisite for these episodes. I feel like we have to.
But
yeah,
it's true. It is very true. It's you make these changes and you never notice them yourself. But the only thing that is important is you continually try and get better. I turn to my mate as well, who's very all in on training and just progressing and just leveling up, to be perfectly honest. He trains at top team and whatnot, and he's a coach and stuff like that. And he said it as well. It's the same. It's like, yeah, we preface everything with be proud of your achievement and what you've done, but also never flipping settle. Like, I could be one of those people, a friend to you, that be like, no, be proud of yourself, and like, that's good. And like, fuck that. Like, let's also be willing to accept that some people just want to be progressively better and you don't want to settle. So yes, be proud of things that you've accomplished and look back and how far, of course, all of that. But why settle? Why settle? Why not look to progress? Don't have an unhealthy obsession with it. Try and create a nice balance. But that's the difficulty, right? That's the difficulty, having that balance.
Very much so.
For wanting to be relentlessly progressive in the pursuit of getting better, but also having a balance to have it at a healthy way. It's hard, but no one fantastically exceptional ever done that by settling. They just
Have you seen the movie Whiplash?
It's a great film.
No, it's a pretty prevalent sort of depiction of what you're saying there. So I definitely subscribe to that to some extent. I think as you said, it's all about balance, right, and perspective on that. Because I think putting everything into one thing, I think this is a problem with athletes. A lot of athletes tend to face is the weight of expectations and what people expect of them, and putting absolutely everything into one specific thing. And I know a lot of some MMA fighters speak about it, probably less so than in most sports, but to some people it becomes a bit of an unhealthy obsession, as you said. So definitely balance is a key thing, with whether it's work or whether it's personal things, anything, right? Too much of anything can be pretty bad, and I can definitely relate to that, and I'm sure you can to some extent. As you said with the body dysmorphia thing, I think that's kind of a straight tie into that, right? I think that comes from, in a lot of ways, the obsession to be better, look better, and feel better. So I think there's a fine line that people got to aim for, right?
The truth of it, you have to be very honest with yourself. Do you want to be the 0.1% in whatever you want to be the 0.1% in? Whether that be an MMA fighter, whether that be a YouTube film creator, whether that be a flipping clothing designer. Do you want to be the 0.1%? If the answer is yes, you're going to be unhealthily obsessed. You have to be. And you're not going to be able to manufacture that. You either are going to be or you're not going to be. It's as simple as that. You can't engineer this obsession for the most part. But the truth of it is, whether it be healthy, whether it be not, it's all personal. So I think sometimes people look at other people's lives and they go, you work too much, or he does this too much, or he does that too much. We're all very different people, and it could look unhealthy to us, but it could look very necessary to that person. I think if you go back and look at Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast back in the day, and look at how he engineered his content creation, you could probably say, that's not particularly healthy. But he didn't have a particularly healthy mindset of being the regular 98%. He wanted to be the 0.1%. So your actions are going to have to reflect that. And I think that's a nuanced conversation that needs to be had. Like, understand what you want to achieve, and then assess your expectations off the back of that. Because if you want mediocre achievements, then of course you don't have to be unhealthy about things. Of course you don't have to be obsessed. You can do things in moderation. If you want to be the 0.1%, do you think that Ronaldo done football in moderation? Do you think that flipping Alex Volkanovski does MMA in moderation? Do you think that Roger Federer done tennis in moderation? No. Of course they didn't. Did Steve Jobs
it's an interesting name you brought up Volkanovski there. Because I actually made a big point about it in my latest video. I did a video on why MMA fighters are doomed to fail. And it sounds a bit morbid, but I really dissected the various factors that revolve around that, whether it's money motivations, delusions of grandeur, etc., etc. And one of the points I made was about the obsession with fighting and the thrill of the fight and that adrenaline rush and the dopamine hit you get from combat sports that you can't really find anywhere else. And it's what keeps so many fighters hanging around later on in their careers, where they think they can hang and still fight, and they just want to chase that high. And I brought up that point of Volkanovski after he lost to Makhachev at 294 with the head kick on short notice, and he really had that emotional outpour in the post-fight press conference, saying he was struggling without fighting when he was outside of camp, and even with his family, he wasn't happy, and he was drinking all the time. And I think that just ties back to what I said about the healthy, or more in this case, unhealthy obsession with in this case MMA. And there's a lot of factors around this. So it's about balance, as I said. And I think he's in a better place now with it. I mean, obviously I can't speak for him, but judging by, the way he's carried himself in recent interviews and the way he took the Topuria loss, I think it's a good indication of that. But again, you see, it affects these guys even at the top level. So as you said, I know you said Volkanovski has the drive, and that's part of the reason why he is the best. And he has been the best, and he's had so many title defenses. But at the same time, it's a very much a double-edged sword that I think is, in a lot of ways, is kind of impossible to avoid if you want to be the best. Yeah,
you have to go to the extreme. Like, you have to go to the edge. You have to literally go and stand on the flipping edge, because, like I said, there's no one else going to stand there. But with great risk comes great reward. As cliche as that is, it's very, very true. And it is just like that. I think there's a lot of people, and I don't mean to be one of those in today's market. I think it's just expectation, though. It's just the expectation. It's the expectation of, we have complete exposure at all times to what people are doing of the 0.1%, whether it be people's physiques, which are ridiculous, if it be people's monetary situations, which are ridiculous, people have created something, or influencers, whatever it may be. We see the surface level. We see that. But people don't realize the price that those people are paying with that. It may not seem like much to you witnessing from the outside looking in, but more times than not, every second of their life is engineered in a way to create what you're seeing there. If you're looking at someone on your For You page and they've got a ridiculous physique, I guarantee you one thing. That person's training once, twice a day. They're counting their macronutrients. They know exactly their fiber intake. They know how many proteins they've had in the last month. They haven't missed a session in the last 2 years. They don't drink. They don't have unscheduled meals. This is the most extreme example, the people who are getting on stage. Yeah. But this is my point. You then have people who are looking at that and saying, okay, I want this. And their expectations are completely misaligned with actual reality. And that's when there's this great disconnect. So, yeah, expectation management is everything, really, isn't
Expectations. Great expectations. Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
True.
This has been the MMA Careers Podcast, episode number 71. And it was a very thorough and deep chat. Hopefully we'll have many more of them to come. And we will see you next Sunday. Have a good one.